It was thought that Volo vanished from history after his defeat in Hisui, but as it turns out, that's far from being true. His clothing is found in the modern-day Lumiose Museum, supposedly donated by the man himself. But why would he travel halfway across the world all the way to the Kalos region? It's because Volo never abandoned his pursuit. He continued to follow the trails of mythology that would lead him closer to having the means to subjugate Arceus. And luckily for him, a man named Heath recently discovered what resided at the bottom of Paldea's great crater, a Pokemon that bore the shape of our planet, Terapagos. But not only that, Heath also wrote about indestructible plates carved with ancient writing, inscriptions shaped similarly to the ones he found in Sinnoh's mythology, and even herbs that could create Pokemon that resembled Arceus' blessed nobles. And this is where everything begins to connect, because Heath's expedition into the great crater of Paldea took place around 200 years ago, which, surprisingly enough, lines up pretty perfectly with the time where Legends of Arceus takes place. How do I know this? Well, that's due to Spiritom's existence. In Diamond and Pearl's Pokédex, it was sealed 500 years ago, and in Legends of Arceus, it's said to be hundreds of years ago. If we combine that with clues like Galarian wheezing only appearing after industrialization, we get Hisui's rough time period being a little less than 200 years ago. With that in mind, it puts Volo in the perfect position to have read the book about Heath's expedition. But traveling to the other side of the world for a legend that others called a hoax wouldn't be worth the effort. Thankfully, Volo knew of a place that held crystals similar to those written about in the book, the crystal pool in the close-by region of Kitakami. However, that wasn't the only reason Volo was attracted to that specific location, as it too held a rather strange rumor. It said that it allowed people to meet those from the past. This rumor actually correlates suspiciously well with something Heath recorded in his book. It states that when he strayed from the exploration team's side, he found himself in an unfamiliar place where he spoke with someone. Then later, he woke up with a page in his hand, one that had his own handwriting, but strangely enough, he couldn't remember writing it. He says it felt like a dream. That description perfectly mirrors an event we had happen to ourselves in the crystal pools of Kitakami. When we met with the real Professor Tura or Sada, they too described it as being an unfamiliar place, and surrounding them at the time was a dreamlike mist. I think you can guess where I'm heading with this. What if it was Volo that gave Heath the page to his own book? When Heath appeared in front of Volo, it was likely that he learned from him that he was from the past, specifically during the time where Heath was on the expedition in Area Zero. And when he realized that fact, it gave Volo another opportunity to mess with Pokemon's timeline. Thus, he quite literally ripped a page out of Heath's own book and gave it to his past version, creating something known as a bootstrap paradox, where the page's true origin is unexplained. However, the fact that Heath came from the past made Volo realize something else. The force, or the energy that transported Heath into the future, must be connected to the crystals in this pool. And we know this to be true because these Terra crystals allowed Sada and Turo to code advanced AI, something that shouldn't exist in our time period. And while we'll never have access to these crystals in our world, the coding part shouldn't be off limits to us. And a quick note, this next section is a paid promotion, which today's sponsor, Boot.Dev, makes a lot easier. Boot.Dev allows you to learn about back-end web development through project-based learning. These coding projects are divided into two different categories: guided ones and ones that are specifically designed to put onto your job portfolio, because that's what their goal is, to prepare you for what you'll actually need. Here, let me show you. As you can see, I'm currently making my way through their Golang course, in order to later work on their guided build your own Pokédex project. But let's say you get stuck on a problem. What then? Well, here on Boot.Dev, you can join a community of over 65,000 coders, easily review the way their instructors wrote the code, or you can even ask the bear named Boots. Boots is trained on all of their available courses, which means he'll have no trouble helping you with anything that you might be stuck on. Boots is also built in a way where he will not directly give you the answer, and instead he'll slowly push you towards the right direction in order for you to solve it yourself. Oh, and before I forget, all of their content is free to read and watch, and the membership unlocks interactive features like XP, coding projects, and community boss fights. If you're still unsure about it, then you can try all of their projects for free. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee, and when you combine that with my code, MaceDragon, you also get 25% off of your first annual subscription. As a side note, I also recently discovered that they have a YouTube channel, with quite a few subscribers actually, so if you want, you can go check them out over there as well. I'll have both linked in the description. The book that Heath wrote after his expedition didn't just contain information on the crystals, however, it also held information about a Pokemon, which for Volo could only mean one thing. The being that Heath encountered down in Area Zero had the ability to transport beings through both time and space. something that would usually require the combined forces of Palkia and Dialga to be controlled. This is what he was looking for, a being that could rival Arceus. With that thought, Volo left the land of Kitakami and started his long journey to Paldea, the region that neighbors the land of Kalos. There's something I forgot to mention though. While Area Zero does have a lot of mysteries, something really important is never explained to us. Why were terrestrialized Pokemon only discovered outside of the crater's depths 140 years ago? What caused more of these Pokemon to start terrestrializing at random? Well, we can jot it down to something happening to Terapagos. After all, the energy that radiates off of him while he slumbers forms the many crystals within the cavern, as well as the terrestrialization phenomenon as a whole. But if his expedition occurred 60 years before that date, and there wasn't any more recorded contact with Terapagos until modern day time, then what caused these Terra Pokemon to appear so randomly? To get the answer to that, we need to look at exactly what Volo would have done after he arrived in Paldea. Keep in mind that during this time, neither Turo or Sara had created the various research stations or even the entryway yet, so a journey down there will be impossible for most, but not for Volo. It's shown to us many times over and over that Volo isn't against entering dangerous locations. Him finding Giratina, for example, required him to enter Turnback Cave, a place that's filled with dense fog and a maze-like structure that would bring you back to the same entrance no matter how many different doorways you tried. Either way, we also know that Volo came from a time where ride Pokemon were already a known concept, so cooperating with his team of 6 powerful Pokemon to traverse the steep cliffs of Area Zero would make a lot of sense in this case, and does. As he made his way down, he discovered the things recounted in Heath's journal, the sigils carved into the cavern's floor, the herba mystica that allowed Pokemon to become as large as the nobles that Arceus itself blessed, and he even discovered the strange plate, the one made of material that couldn't be damaged in any way. Every artifact cemented his theory of whatever Heath once met down here being the equivalent to Arceus in power. Continuing on, he followed the crystals that became more plentiful the further down he went, until he was met with a dead end. The only thing he found here was a small green gem. Just like Kieran, Volo too pulled this gem out of the crystal it was stuck to, which, just like in our time, awoke Terapagos from his slumber. But this being wasn't what the book described. It clearly depicted something more, something much larger and stronger. Volo had experienced something similar before though. Giratina too first needed a power boost before it could open up the space-time rift over Mount Coronet, and what better to power this being than by using the energy contained in the various crystals found here. While these are the same conclusions that Briar pulled, there was one key difference between the two. Briar knew that the crystals found here are the guardians that watch over Terapagos. She even says that breaking them would cause unknown consequences, as they are made of pure terrestrial energy. But Volo didn't know that. He prides himself in his knowledge. Second-guessing himself wasn't something he did often. Thus, he commanded his Garchomp to start mining the crystals, but as it did, strange energy began to pour onto it. On Garchomp's head formed a crown of sorts, the one we know as a stellar crown, which caused it to go berserk. Volo tried to recall Garchomp into its Pokeball, but if even a Master Ball cannot retrieve a rogue Terra Pokemon, then a prehistoric Pokeball would stand little to no chance. As much as it pained him, Volo had to leave Garchomp behind, as the cavern already known for its cave-ins was falling apart. This is, of course, speculation on my side, but the chance of this being Volo's Garchomp isn't zero. They're both males, they both have Dragonclaw in their first move slot, and the one we find down in the cavern has a higher level than Volo's Garchomp, which just means that he trained it. Either way, there are still quite a few questions left unanswered. Volo coming to Paldea does explain why he would head to Kalos next, since they're only divided by a mountain range, but there's still the fact that the time period he's in now is about 140 years in the past of modern day time, which must mean that Volo here is immortal. I say immortality here because of a statement he made on the top of Mount Coronet. He says that he will stand before Arceus even if he has to wait centuries to do so. If he had the ability to time travel instead of being immortal, this statement wouldn't make much sense. After all, he wouldn't be waiting. For him, it would take no time whatsoever. With that in mind, I've got a pretty concrete way of how he could have become immortal. I don't think he lied when he said that the blood of the ancient people of Sinnoh ran through his veins. This is the same blood that also runs through Kogita, who surprisingly has a lot of evidence that backs up her own elongated lifespan. The first piece of evidence lies in the many old verses that are scattered around the Hisui region. Their contents heavily allude to the owner having a much longer lifespan than those around them. For example, Old Verse 2 has mentions of old companions having left the author behind, even their own beloved now being being gone from them. These descriptions mirror Kogita's own actions, where she's now seen living alone in a place called the Ancient Retreat. Old verse 12 is even more important than the last one, as it shows us something that Kogita has explicitly stated to do herself, to wait for the one with the mission to appear. The 12th verse also states that the author has resigned themselves for an eternity to do so. But that's not all. Old verse 17 references the author's close relationship to the god of spring, Inamoris. Again, Kogita too has a close relationship to this member of the forces of nature. Now, you might be asking, what's her age then? Well, based on the contents of the other old verses, Kogita's age would have to lie between around 1000 to 2000 years old, which would mean that her lifespan's infinite, no? Again, I don't think that's actually the case here. Remember how I said that Kogita's companions passed away before she did? I have a strong suspicion that the immortality of the Celestica people is based on their motivation and drive to continue living. Without a goal, these people would age like normal mortals, which would mean that Kogita, now having fulfilled her wish, would also soon pass away. The same goes for Volo, of course, except his goal of subjugating Arceus is far from being complete. He even stated himself that it pains him to not know the truth behind every myth and legend. And as we now see in the modern-day museum, it's still certainly the case. His mission is far from being over. On top of that, there's also the case that he doesn't view himself as a mortal. This can be seen when Giratina lost to the player in the destroyed Temple of Sinnoh. Volo yells out to him, saying, "How could you possibly turn tail and run from this puny human?" He doesn't say a human. Instead, he chooses to use the words this human, as if he weren't one himself. With all of that in mind, we can finally talk about his reason to travel to Kalos, and specifically find out what he did there. For this section though, we should probably head back to the Lumiose Museum and investigate the clues found there, for which I think some detective music is in order. No? Based on what I've seen here, 3 items are worth our attention. Volo's clothing, the displayed sketches of Laventon's old Pokedex, and the ancient Sinnohan writing carved into a giant stone tablet. Let's start with the ritual attire. We know that it was donated by the person who wore it. The obvious answer is Volo, but the player character is also a candidate. While it's only implied, not confirmed, that the player returned to their original time since Ingo managed it, it still seems unlikely that Pokemon would tease this idea only to reveal that the outfit was just one of the garments we happened to be wearing when Arceus sent us back. With that aside, there's another detail that might just hint at Volo's current whereabouts. The same character who mentioned the donor also said that this person looked at Laventon's sketches with a nostalgic expression. Again, that points to the player since we completed the Pokedex, but Laventon once noted something odd about Volo. He says that strangely enough, Volo seemed to be much more interested in us completing the Pokedex than we first thought. This brings us to the large stone tablet that's between both Palkia and Dialga's statue. We've seen similar glyphs before, each with a layered meaning, yet never arranged like this. It raises the question of whether there's a more hidden significance, though there are multiple interpretations make things difficult to pin down. I'll give you my attempt to decipher them here, but honestly, if you've got a better one, then do let me know. Origin gives rise to time and space. Mind, will, and emotion shape the world. This row encodes the cosmic principles Volo obsesses over, the truth of our world. A dream that was hidden under. Full of gratitude, I traversed the land to destroy. In this row, Volo tells us what Heath told him after he appeared in a cloud of dreams. It then details him traveling to Paldea in order to find the means to destroy Arceus. I searched for growth and the legendary being by traversing the seas, ascending the crater, and heading into the storm. In this case, it details Volo traveling to Paldea to then search for Terapagos in order to somehow garner enough power to defeat Arceus. I entered the frozen world below and saw a primordial force. Now these last 2 symbols were tricky, but I don't think they hold their usual meaning, and instead refer to Terapagos needing a power boost just like Giratina. And the Manaphy refers to the Guardians, the crystals that he broke. After all, Manaphy is one of the Sea Guardians. You have to keep in mind that for this translation, there were limited sigils Volo could work with. He didn't have access to a full alphabet, so creative interpretation should at least be allowed to a limited extent here. Considering everything we've discussed in this video, I've got one more thing to show you. In the apartment with the Laventon picture, there are 3 items. A scarlet cube, a violet book, and a treasure chest. Is that a coincidence, or is it a reference to Scarlet and Violet, as well as the treasures of Area 0? I think I'll leave that up to you to decide. Once again, thank you to Boot.Dev for sponsoring today's video. I'll leave both their website and channel link down below.